what to discuss today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second vlog on the Johari channel. Hello, it is a blue drake, or if you don't know what the hell that means, hi, I am the lead vocalist of Johari, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 favorite deathcore bands. Now, before we get into this, for those of you who are not very deep in the metal scene, let me just tell you, the metal scene is rife with, I don't want to say insecurity, I guess puritanism, is that even a word? For instance, some of my fans from the gaming side of things know that if there's a game like Halo, or even a game like Project Reality and stuff like that, everything else is garbage. And if something doesn't subscribe to exactly that style of gameplay, then it isn't, true fill in the blank. That is like metal subgenres in a nutshell. So I'm going to say this going straight ahead. Some of the bands that I'm going to talk about here are going to be very debatably deathcore, but that isn't really the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is just to talk about some bands associated with the rough genre that people can find and explore. And honestly, if I said top 5 deathcore bands and I literally just copy and pasted the same sounding band 5 times without any deviation, it would be, boring, because I want people to experience new music, not the same music with different band names, So anyways, we're going to be talking about top 5 deathcore bands. And for those of you who don't really know deathcore, don't listen to deathcore, I personally enjoy deathcore. It's not one of those things that I listen to all the time. But deathcore to me is kind of like just rough sex. Like sometimes you just gotta. Like sometimes you're just in the mood and it needs to happen. But at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like rough sex requires a little bit of adequate foreplay. I don't know why we just got into fucking metaphors, but it's appropriate. It's totally appropriate. And the problem I have with deathcore is so many of them just don't get the foreplay right. They just go straight into fucking you. And I don't know, maybe some people are into that. Some people are just, rape me, please, fill in the blank deathcore band. But I personally enjoy, when I listen to deathcore, there's 2 things that I look for. A, it needs to lead in properly. I don't want it to just all start at once. If I'm going to really listen to a song that makes me want to fucking annihilate something, I want it to lead me up into that mood. I can't just switch on annihilation, emotion. I have to be led into that. And the second thing is, I don't like deathcore bands that all just subscribe to the same cookie cutter in a box sound. In fact, if anything, the deathcore bands that explore styles or combine styles with deathcore outside of the subgenre, I respect the most, especially because they reside inside of a genre that is so fiercely opposed to that and is supposed to be puritanical. But I think that's kind of frustrating, because I think in many ways when you grind that idea, that puritanical idea where everything has to sound exactly the same in order to be deathcore, it restricts interesting artistic combinations and artistic freedom that otherwise would be really good and enjoyable. And there's a lot of bands out there that have explored, big deathcore bands that have explored alternate revenues, and even though they get a lot of flack for it, those are the bands I want to talk about the most, because I love that, and I think that's really, really essential, to take such a disgustingly harsh genre and combine it with other things that contrast that harshness, which give you a new perspective on the music itself. I enjoy that. I really think that that's enjoyable. Not to say there's not a place for just the straight rapey stuff, but I enjoy texture and different comparisons and modifications and combinations in all forms of my music. So let's start with the list. The first band that I want to talk about is a very smaller band, not very well known. And hell, I think Johari is pretty much the same size as this band, which is kind of a shame, because I feel like these guys are really, really good, and I wish they would get more appreciation. But this band is called Delusions of Grandeur, and I really like this band because this is one of those bands, when I first heard them, it's kind of for those of you who come from my game development channel, there's so many things that were God, it would be so obvious to make a good game by doing these things, but why does nobody do it? Same with deathcore. When I first heard this song from Delusions of Grandeur, I was like, yes, Thank you. This is how it should be. Thank you so much. And Delusions of Grandeur does also kind of it combines different elements in the music. You know, it's not just deathcore. It's got a little bit of a djent flair to it. I kind of hate using that word djent because it's kind of like djent as a genre is kind of like a testament to how ridiculously unorganized like metal subgenres are. Like it's barely even a word. Like Periphery just coined it, or somebody coined it. I don't maybe it wasn't Periphery. They popularized it, but it's just kind of ridiculous to keep track of all these stupid little subgenre names. But whatever. Delusions of Grandeur took this deathcore formula and kind of modernized it a little bit, which I think was good. It was fresh, it was new, it was awesome. I was like, oh yeah, finally something that appeals to like my more modern taste in music. So another thing about Delusions of Grandeur is it leads in properly. Like this is the kind of band that just doesn't, you know, it doesn't just rape you right out of the front, which is like fucking blast beats and shit. Like, I mean, well, okay, blast beats isn't as big of a deal in deathcore, but still, like, it doesn't just start right out of the box. It leads up. It builds the aggression in a way that feels genuine, and I want more of that in deathcore. Like, I can't tell you how many times like I start up a Spotify playlist and I'm going through, and every time like I start a new song and it's just instantly like and I'm like, just next. Come on, like foreplay me a little bit. God damn it! Like it's so frustrating. And then this band just showed that, as far as I'm concerned, like a good way to do it. That's so few musicians do. So anyways, let's listen to this band. This is Delusions of Grandeur. We're not going to play the whole thing. Make sure you go check out them on Spotify, or you should go check out anything else. Holy God, that's... my monitor screen is lighting up my face so much more than I realize. Anyways, okay, let's watch this. This is Theatropy. I think I'm saying that right. See, this is how builds should be. This is how builds should be. This makes you want to fucking destroy. That's great to me. I enjoy that. Like, it's a modern sound. It's really aggressive, but it's a new take on an aggression that doesn't just feel overplayed. It doesn't just feel generic. I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. Also, honestly, anything that like is like sci-fi related or like has space in it, I'm just like, oh yes, space! Like fucking anything like with machines or Born of Osiris, I'm like, yes, more space, more. Anyways, moving on. So the next band I want to talk about, which is one of my favorite deathcore bands of all time, also very, very popular. Like, this is probably going to be the most unknown band on this list. The rest of the bands are going to be, you know, fairly AAA, you know, like they're going to be pretty popular in the genre, but at the same time, I think they're worth talking about because they have a history to them that I think paints kind of like what I was talking about before, you know, taking different directions and stuff like that. I'm really happy that leaders in the subgenre actually do that. But the next band we're going to be talking about, that is one of my favorite deathcore bands, debatably, I don't even know how this is debatable, but whatever, is Thy Art Is Murder. I love Thy Art Is Murder. Very, very popular. You know, it's not like this underground, you know, ooh, Thy Art Is Murder. Nobody else knows of this band. You know, it's a really popular band. It's a really good band. And the song we're going to be talking about is their most popular song, Reign of Darkness. My favorite song, obviously, popular for a reason. This is one of the few bands where, like, the most popular song is also my favorite song. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, this makes sense. This is their best song by far. It's really, really good. And this is also, like, a good showcase of how to do a good build and how to do a proper build. It leads in. It's not, you know, rapey. It builds the emotion properly to make you enjoy the aggression when it comes to it. And also I feel like some deathcore bands, they get too aggressive, if that makes sense. Like I feel like at some point, if you try too hard, it kind of loses the aggression factor. You know, aggression is supposed to be more subtle. It's supposed to be more controlled. Because control, you know, if your aggression is controlled and it feels like tight and well articulated, like that almost makes it more aggressive, because you're like, shit, these guys have their shit together and this is like an interesting take. You know, kind of like the same way where in some takes, you know, if you talk softly at a specific point, that can almost be more intimidating than if you were to just like scream everything. I love that. You know, that subtle play on emotion, and kind of like doing contrasts in order to highlight certain thematic elements that otherwise would be overplayed. I think that's good, and I think Die Hard as Murder gets it really, really right in Reign of Darkness. So we're going to talk about Reign of Darkness, and you can just see what I'm talking about yourself. If you've already heard this band, then hopefully you can just enjoy Die Hard as Murder for a second. Also, this is really good cinematography. The cinematography in this is also really great complementation of is that a word? Complementation of the music, especially with the silhouettes and stuff like that. The way it's employed, it doesn't feel it doesn't feel generic, but at the same time, it still properly represents the sound. See, I love this. Soundscapes, having this whole new subtle aspect of creepiness and intimidation. Like, yes. This is how you introduce a song. This is incredible. Make sure this is up. I love that. And you know, it's funny, a lot of critics of deathcore kind of like miss the point of deathcore. You know, ironically, both the critics and some bands themselves like miss the point of deathcore. You know, a lot of people are like, oh man, it's so simple, you know, it's just breakdowns and stuff like that. You don't understand. Like, that's not the point of deathcore, in my opinion, isn't like about the breakdowns. It's about the textures contrasted with the breakdowns. The breakdowns and the simplistic guitar work is kind of a way to, break down things to be easy to understand, to be easy to ingest, but also to highlight other parts of the music that you didn't even originally realize was complex or had texture that you could appreciate. You know, there's a lot of power metal bands that go in the opposite direction. You know, like there's so much orchestration and there's so much going on, and it's beautiful in its own way. One of my favorite bands in that respect is Amaranth. You know, like that's their thing, you know, like, and Sonata Arctica and stuff like that. But sometimes you want to go in the opposite direction. Sometimes, you know, it's kind of like the difference between when you go eat like a really awesome fatty burger that has all the toppings on it and stuff like that. I mean, that's great. But sometimes, you know, you just want to go to a fancy restaurant where they just have like one thing of sauce around like a morsel. And then, you know, you taste the sauce and it's just there. You get to appreciate just that. And then you get to eat the morsel, and you get, its simplicity allows you to appreciate more fundamental elements that are normally overshadowed. That's the beauty of deathcore, and I feel like sometimes bands miss that. It's like, oh, well, we can just put in, you know, breakdowns and shit, and like this will just work. It's like, no, you need to draw attention to other aspects of the music, and I think this build is like a great example of that. you have all these textures and you have all of these different aspects that originally didn't mean as much to you, but now they do. Now since there's less distracting you away from it, you can appreciate it as almost its own element, which is really cool. Like that, you hear that what the hell is that word? Like that high sonority or something, like right at the end. You hear almost like that what is word? I want to say like mirror, kind of like this reverberation, like this high tonality reverberation that just sounds so awesome. Right there. A little bit of like microphone feedback. I think that's what that sounds like. And it normally in any other piece of music, like, it would go completely unnoticed. But in this, it builds texture. It builds so much more texture that you wouldn't normally be able to appreciate. And I love that. And then this comes in order to just be kind of like, here is, you know, the cracker. This is the simple cracker of which we are, you know, sprinkling this really, you know, fine like cheese or sauce over the top of. Like, this is the simplistic cracker that forms the base of this entire song that allows you to appreciate everything else. I forget the fucking lyrics, but whatever. So fucking sick. I love that shit. So anyways, that's Thy Art Is Murder. Hopefully you can go check them out and have like a whole new appreciation. There's actually a whole bunch of other bands that kind of do this. For instance, Slice the Cake, but I'm not going to talk about them here. You should go check that out. All right, so the next band, if there is any band that I make in this video that is gonna like drive people crazy when I call them deathcore, it's gonna be this band. But I want to talk about them anyways because it's kind of like very related to the deathcore genre. Even though the deathcore genre, well, I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to. But a lot of the deathcore people that I talk to, like this band is like, oh no, not deathcore, but whatever. Like I think there's still a really excellent example of stepping outside the mold and doing interesting things that you can appreciate from an artistic standpoint. And who we're going to be talking about today is Cattle Decapitation. And it's funny because their name is hilarious. In fact, I feel like their name, Cattle Decapitation, I feel like it's almost intentionally a joke. Like, I think it's so ridiculous and it's so like hilariously death metal. I think that was the point. Like, Cattle Decapitation. I think that was the reason. Now I've heard rumors that they're like vegetarian or something like this, and the entire theme of the band is drawing attention to the horrors of like slaughtering animals and stuff like that. And all of their music and songs, like the lyrics are all thematically about, you know, the horror, explaining in excruciating detail the horrors of killing animals and stuff like that. Now, I've heard that this is because they're vegetarian and because they want to draw attention to those kind of horrors in order to maybe encourage people to not be that way. That's what I've heard. I don't really know if that's true, actually. I don't know. It would be cool if it was, because that would explain a lot to what they're doing. Because in some cases, you're just like, dude, this is too much. Are you doing this to be metal? But if that's the case, apparently they're not doing it to be metal. They're doing it kind of more of like a movement. But maybe I'm full of it. That's just what I've heard. But let's talk about the music. The aspect of Cattle Decapitation that I like the most is their exploration of sound. And not just instrumentally, but in fact, primarily not instrumentally, but vocally. Their vocalist explores these really outlandish and kind of like frontier ways of performing vocals, which is really cool. And he doesn't do it too often. Well, no, I mean, at least in Cattle Decapitation's 2012 album, what was the name of that? I can't remember. Hold up, let's see here. Go to album. What album was this? Monolith of Inhumanity. He does it the most in this. I haven't listened to too much of their newer stuff, so I don't know if he continues this. But I remember watching a documentary of him tracking this album and trying these new vocal takes. And it was really cool to me to think, like, oh my god, this guy is really exploring new ways of performing music vocally. Because as a vocalist, and well, I don't want to say as a vocalist, that sounds so fucking pompous, but you know, as somebody who enjoys listening to vocalists and what they do with their voices to explore what they're capable of, I thought that this was one of probably the more unique explorations of performing that definitely influenced me, and probably influenced a lot of other people in the genre as well. Just to think, like, oh my god, there's other ways that we can do this. Because I grew up, obviously, studying opera. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in classical voice, and I was on scholarship in opera, which is ridiculous. I don't know why the hell I became a metal vocalist, because, well, to be honest, I hated the opera scene. They're all fucking pompous. It drives me nuts. But when I started exploring metal, you know, that was, you know, screaming and stuff like that to all the opera people. Like, that was just insane. It was ridiculous. But I loved studying it because in opera, there's a lot of aspects of performing. Well, they also use kind of like the right way of performing, unfortunately, in opera to be more restrictive. Like, you have to support with the diaphragm, you have to sing a very specific way. And I thought it was interesting when I started exploring aggressive music and screaming and stuff like that. A lot of the aspects that I learned in classical voice also applied to aggressive voice. And a lot of the classical voice teachers and stuff like that will tell you, like, oh, you're going to ruin your voice if you scream and stuff like that. And honestly, I think that's all just a stigma. I think that's because they don't really understand aggressive vocalists and stuff like that, and they just have a cultural aversion to it. So they just kind of try to make themselves feel good and be like, oh, no, that's not how you do it. But there actually is a lot of ways that you can practice and you can perform aggressive vocals that, A, do not harm your voice at all, but B, you can also explore to give different forms of tonality, you know, different methods of screaming that give different tones and stuff like that. And you know, even more unfortunately, some of the ways that you can perform aggressive vocals actually are destructive, but they yield a certain tone, and that tone sometimes is very favorable. More classical ways of screaming are less destructive, or in many cases not destructive at all, but they also have a very similar tone, kind of like in opera. In opera, you have a very specific tone, like everybody is going to sound that way. But you know, pop vocalists and stuff like that, it's like, I woke up today and I fucking music theater 101, you know, like that. And those are two different trains of clean vocal training that yield two different tones. It's the same in aggressive vocalists. I would do it here, but it's too fucking loud. Screaming's too loud for this microphone. It would not sound good at all. And you can get different tones through different methods. And Cattle Decapitation explored this new way that was so groundbreaking as far as I was concerned. It really was. He was able to get this unique, almost clean, pitched scream that they actually used as a chorus, almost as if it was a clean vocal sound. And I remember watching that documentary of him, you know, practicing it and performing it, and it was so different. Like the way he had to kind of like prepare himself, it was so awkward, but it was so interesting to see it yield this original tone. And where this is most evident is in Kingdom of Tyrants, which I love. I love Kingdom of Tyrants. And you can hear this voice effect that he uses that's very rare and very interesting. And the coolest thing about this, I know I've kind of talked a while, but it's a total rant, so deal with it. The coolest thing about this is after he explored this, I started hearing other bands exploring this, bands that probably normally wouldn't have explored it at all, and they kind of had their own take on it, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. He opened up this whole new way to perform music, this whole new trend in deathcore, which is so cool. It's so cool. So all right, so let's listen to this. This is Kingdom of Tyrants. We're going to start a little bit early, where it's just kind of, you know, normal cattle decapitation, and then it breaks into the chorus, and you'll hear this style and how different it is, and how it's used in a way that's almost clean. Almost, they created an entire clean section that I love. So let's listen. And this is so incredible because this is coming from a band that normally, you know, sounds like this. I'm just not going back far enough. And that's so cool to have that contrast. You have this very typical death metal sound, you know, lots of blast beats, lots of, you know, non-tonal growling and screams and stuff like that. And then you have this incredibly unique pitched sound that's actually used as a clean hook. And this is the same vocalist. I don't want people to think that this is like one vocalist in the guessing. Like, this is him just using a completely different way of performing. And then it breaks into this incredibly ambient, very, very contrasting to all of their other work, this very immersive ambient chorus that I think is beautiful. That's so incredible. It's so incredible. It's almost like a lullaby. It's so disgustingly beautiful. And I think that texture is what I hunt for. Things that I haven't heard before, different ways to explore performing. And that is a premium example of how to do that. Okay, I've spent way too much time on cattle decapitation, and I kind of like ranted a little bit. So let's move on. Let's make up for lost time. I'm already at 29 minutes. Let's try not to go over like 35. The next band I want to talk about is a band that I think is really, really cool because they could have been a generic deathcore band, because they started out as a generic deathcore band, and they could have stayed that way. I mean, I guess that's debatable. I don't really know. I haven't really explored every single facet of this band's history. So maybe they did some crazy, unique stuff way in the back in the day, but I don't know about it. But I think the reason I like this band as a example of one of my favorite deathcore bands is because this is an example of a generic deathcore band that started incorporating different forms of music in their music. They started exploring different avenues of tonality in deathcore, which I thought was really cool because they didn't have to do that at all. They started out as a very straight, breakdowns, not much else, guitar, screaming, generic deathcore band. And then they broke out, and I think a big reason of this is because they partnered with the guitarist of Born of Osiris, and if you know your metal shit, you know who I'm talking about already. They broke that mold so extremely and broke into this whole new territory of orchestral arrangements and clean vocals interspersed with deathcore vocals. Like, it was so awesome and unique and interesting, and I loved their EP where they explored that. And even afterwards, they've kind of like continued exploring, even though they've kind of recessed a little bit back into their their shell. They're a little bit more typical deathcore. They retained some of that exploratory elements, which I think is really awesome, and I think more bands should see that as a strength. So if you haven't figured it out already, Chelsea Grin is the band that I'm talking about. I really enjoyed Chelsea Grin. Really enjoy their new stuff. Like, this whole new era of Chelsea Grin is an aspect that I never saw coming, and I love. Especially since they started out as such a generic. That was kind of, if you said Chelsea Grin, everybody's like, okay, well, yeah, of course you listen to Chelsea Grin. They're like the fucking. But since then they've become so much more complex and textured, which is cool, which is awesome. That's awesome. I did not expect that from them. So one of the first songs that I want to show you is actually probably one of their more recent releases. And this was after the album they released with their big changeover, where it retains kind of more of their deathcore elements, but keeps that kind of orchestral, more, I get epic kind of sound, incorporated with very strict deathcore formulas. So, all right, let's go ahead. This song is called "Playing with Fire." You can hear all these different textures, the choirs, the orchestral arrangements, and all that stuff. This is something that in old Chelsea Grin, you didn't have any of this. Even some of the vocal arrangements and stuff like that, the yelling versus just the strict deathcore, aggressive vocals all the time, and having more variety in the vocal performance. It's all just new explorations that I really respected. So good, so good. I love that. And here, let's actually listen to their old stuff. Oh, go away, Chelsea Grin. Let's listen to some of their older tracks. And you'll hear like how huge of a contrast their musical styles were. Here we go. This is one of their old tracks.
Fire!
See, and it's not bad. I don't want to get me wrong. Like, it's not bad. It's good. It's just, it's very safe, but it's got a lot of those really cool deathcore elements. So it's not a bad song. Like, it's got really like tonal, guttural vocals that have kind of like that harmonic element to them. But everything else, it's very cookie cutter. It's very safe deathcore sound. And then they broke out of this mold so extremely, probably because of their guitarist, and that one of their next releases was this, which was just such a huge change that I thought was I guess I respect them because they're so brave. I mean, how many views is that? 4 million versus, I guess they didn't get that many views on this one. Well, yeah, shit. But it was such an interesting change to their sound, and I respected their exploration of the genre with this. This was my favorite album from them by far. This is really cool because, and the reason I think this is really cool is, I mean, a lot of people would say, be like, yeah, but Chelsea Grin, like ditched their history and they're no longer a deathcore band when they did this. But here's the reason I think this is really, really cool, is because you have a lot of bands that kind of start out light, and then they try to go heavier to be like, hey, look, we're cool, look at how fucking heavy we are and stuff like that, and they aren't really, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure people can think of some. But what I really, really like is when super heavy bands like deathcore and stuff like that go lighter. And I don't mean they have to stay that way, and I'm not saying their old stuff was bad, but for instance, listening to this song, Don't Ask, Don't Tell by Chelsea Grin, it's really cool to hear a band with such a heavy root. You hear all those elements, like the deathcore vocals that are still there. Maybe not like the breakdowns and stuff like that are the exact same as their old material, but this new material still has all of these really harsh deathcore elements still kind of like scattered throughout the song, combined with these more mainstream elements and clean vocals and stuff like that you normally would never have gotten. Like, you never would have gotten this kind of combination of genres if you had left it up to like some other band. Even if you had left it up to something like Asking Alexandria and stuff like that. Like, they're so, Asking Alexandria is kind of like so formulaic and stuff like that it almost borderlines on pop at some points. But this, when you have bands like Chelsea Grin that are so far in the deathcore direction, coming into a mainstream style like this and bringing some of those elements, I think that's really cool. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. This is kind of a little bit of a longer video. We're going to wrap this up with the last band that I want to talk about. And I want to say this band is from Australia. I don't know what it is about Australia and deathcore, but all the best deathcore comes out of Australia. Don't know why. Just happens to be the case. Whatever. Australian deathcore, just, I don't know, just works out somehow, which is strange because you don't even know they're deathcore until you actually start like listening to them and you look into them and you're like, wow, this is fucking another Australian deathcore band. How the hell does that keep happening? But this band, I feel like, is one of the... Let me say this. This is one of those bands where all of the other bands that I've mentioned before then, I feel like this band is a perfect example of how those other bands have influenced the genre, because I feel like this band has been heavily influenced by all of these different artists exploring different ways of performance and tonality and stuff like that, and it's culminated in this one band, which I think is like just the perfect balance of everything, and all of their music is kind of like different, and this band itself, just in the way that Chelsea Grin has like evolved, this band has also evolved over time and explored different sounds, but it does it in such a more meaningful and structured way. Like it's like every album they release is like a chapter, and it feels like there's a reason that it is the way that it is, and the reason they're exploring different elements. And every song I've ever heard from this band, like, whereas Chelsea Grin was kind of like very strict and had like a very strict deathcore roots, this band has always been complex for me. Like, it's always offered something that was a little bit different, and I think they've taken these other influences and also explored them in interesting, meaningful ways. And the band that I want to talk about is Make Them Suffer. I love this band. There's so many tracks I could show from this. Never Bloom and everything that came out of that, which was one of my favorites. Blood Moon, which was one of their newer tracks, which was also like really, really awesome. But one of the best tracks that I think best what's the word? Exemplifies? Is that a word? Their sound and their willingness to explore new sound and use the tool that is deathcore to highlight different aspects of music in new and interesting ways. Like, this is the ultimate track that I think showcases that, because this is a deathcore band, and when you listen to this, like, keep that in mind. Like, this is a deathcore band, and this is a kind of style of music that you've never heard. And in this track, you're going to hear all sorts of things. You know, you're going to hear orchestral elements. You're going to hear kind of like in Thy Art Is Mortar. Let's compare it to this. In Make Them Suffer, you're going to have orchestral elements, kind of like what Chelsea Grin explored. You're going to hear different methods of vocal performing, like pitch screaming and stuff like that, to add texture that Cattle Decapitation explored. You're going to hear different kind of like soundscape elements, kind of like how Thy Art Is Murder explored aspects of sound, not even like instruments and stuff like that, but including sound in their music in meaningful ways. And it also has this modern flair to it, this modern structured flair, similar to Delusions of Grandeur, and it all culminates in like this ultimate amazing track. And what we're going to be listening today is it Ether or Ether? I want to say Ether. This is the track Ether, and I love this song. Every song that Make Them Suffer puts out has so much emotion. And this is why I was saying, like, it's not always about just being aggressive all the time. Sometimes you can get aggressive by employing counterintuitive, like artistic things, emotions and stuff like that. And Make Them Suffer is the kind of band when they can release a track that just is aggressive the entire time but makes you sad. And at the end you're like, wow, that was really profound, and I feel like sad, and I feel like his aggression is him venting his sadness. And even though it's still straight deathcore, like, it tells a story, and that's beautiful to use deathcore in that way. So let's listen to Ether, and hell, I might even play this the whole way through. I won't though. And hopefully you'll hear all of these elements that we've talked about throughout this entire video. So here we go, and enjoy. Actually, stop. I want to say one thing about this track, and one of the reasons I think they know. I think this band knows, because when you listen to the beginning, it sounds like it's about to be a stereotypical deathcore track. And you're like, okay, what you got this time? It just blossoms into this completely different direction, which I think kind of exemplifies that aspect I was talking about of having aggression in a completely different way. And it's like, you know what? You think you know what we're going to do? We're going to do something completely different, and we're kind of more badass for not doing the stereotypical aggressive breakdown right after this. I love that. I think that is awesome. That is a epic way to use deathcore music. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there because I don't want to screw these guys over and play their entire song. Please go listen to Make Them Suffer. It's so incredible, and hopefully you heard everything in that track. You know, like you heard the pitch screams, the orchestral elements, the soundscapes, the fact that it's put together in a way that tells a story and evokes emotion, even though it's supposed to just be, you know, normal grindy deathcore. It's so much more complex than its genre tries to restrict it to be, which I think in its own way is awesome and beautiful. And that's what I love about the genre of deathcore. Like, it has this mold that is meant to be broken, in my opinion. And I think that there's some bands out there breaking it in really meaningful ways and really cool ways. So, you know, huge amounts of respect to Make Them Suffer, Chelsea Grin, Cattle Decapitation. Huge respect to Cattle Decapitation. They're like fucking... they're like the grandfathers of some of this stuff. Like, it's crazy. Thy Art Is Murder is really, really incredible. They're kind of new kids on the block, but oh my god, they're the best new kids on the block. And then Delusions of Grandeur, I hope you guys get your up and coming because you deserve it. The donut on the dick thing, that was some good shit. Okay, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. It is almost 50 minutes of video. I hope you enjoyed this. I would tell you to share and subscribe, but honestly, if you've watched this long, you've probably done something along those lines, because there's nobody else who would be dedicated enough to watch this entire video. So yeah, all right. I will see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, go listen to these bands and tell them that Blue Drake sent you, or Johari. Just take your pick, whatever. Okay, bye.